Have you ever wondered how something can move through government, courts, or corporations for years and still feel unresolved? It's a peculiar phenomenon, isn't it? We see official statements, hear public pronouncements, witness legal proceedings unfold across decades, yet somehow the full picture remains elusive, pieced together from fragments. It's not about grand conspiracies or hidden truths in the dramatic sense. Rather, it's often about the sheer weight of institutional process itself, the cautious, deliberate, and sometimes almost imperceptibly slow pace at which complex organizations acknowledge, investigate, regulate, and respond to challenges that emerge over time. Today, we're going to slowly unpack one of the most publicly discussed processes in the United States, and yet one that remains procedurally difficult to trace. We're going to examine the institutional journey of what are broadly known as per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. These compounds, sometimes called forever chemicals due to their remarkable persistence, have quietly become one of the most significant environmental and public health concerns of our time. But what interests us here isn't just the science or the health impacts, but the intricate, multi-layered institutional process by which this issue has moved from scientific discovery to public awareness, then through regulatory frameworks, legal challenges, and governmental oversight, all without ever quite reaching a definitive, comprehensive resolution that the public can easily grasp. The story of PFAS in the public domain really begins to gain momentum in the early 2000s, though the chemicals themselves had been in production and widespread use since the 1940s. For decades, these compounds, valued for their resistance to heat, water, and oil, were incorporated into countless consumer products, non-stick cookware, stain-resistant fabrics, firefighting foams, and many industrial applications. During these initial decades, scientific research, some of it internal to manufacturing companies, began to suggest that these persistent chemicals might also be present in human bloodstreams and have potential toxicological effects. Yet, for a significant period, this information remained largely within scientific and corporate circles. The shift into broader public awareness was largely catalyzed by legal actions. By the early 2000s, class action lawsuits began to surface, particularly in communities near manufacturing facilities where residents experienced elevated levels of specific PFAS compounds like PFOA, perfluorooctanoic acid, in their drinking water. These legal filings, which drew upon previously undisclosed corporate documents and scientific studies, brought the issue into courtrooms and, consequently, into public view. The sheer volume of evidence presented during these initial legal battles, often involving thousands of pages of internal memos and research findings, slowly compelled a broader institutional acknowledgment. Following these early legal developments, official communication began to develop gradually. In 2005, for example, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, issued a health advisory for PFOA to the public. It was a significant step, an official acknowledgement of concern. However, it was also, by definition, an advisory. It did not carry the weight of an enforceable regulation. It served to inform, to suggest a level of concern, but it didn't mandate action from water utilities or industries. This initial response highlighted the fundamental tension that would characterize the PFAS journey for years. Official recognition often preceded, by a significant margin, official, enforceable action. As the body of scientific research grew, so did the regulatory language. Initially, the focus was primarily on PFOA and PFOS, perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, two of the most well-known and extensively studied PFAS compounds. The EPA's 2006 PFOA stewardship program represented another major procedural milestone. It was a voluntary program, urging major chemical manufacturers to reduce production and use of PFOA and related chemicals by 95% by 2010, with a goal of elimination by 2015. On the surface, this seemed like a clear and decisive move. A timeline was established and a goal articulated. Yet, it was voluntary, relying on corporate commitment rather than statutory enforcement. While successful in phasing out PFOA and PFOS production in the U.S. by participating companies, it didn't address legacy contamination, nor did it cover the thousands of other PFAS compounds that continued to be developed and used. The public had witnessed a significant policy shift, but the procedural gaps for comprehensive remediation and future prevention remained vast. Then came another critical moment of almost clarity in 2016. The EPA released updated lifetime drinking water health advisories for PFOA and PFOS, setting the combined level at 70 parts per trillion. This was a much more specific, scientifically derived number than previous general advisories. It was widely reported, and for many, it signaled a concrete step towards addressing the problem. Communities, water systems, and local health departments now had a specific number to reference. But crucially, it remained an advisory. It was not a maximum contaminant level, MCL, which is a legally enforceable standard under the Safe Drinking Water Act. This meant that while the public had a benchmark, water utilities were not federally required to test for these compounds or treat contaminated water to meet this level. The procedural pathway from scientific consensus to enforceable public health protection was still long and fraught with steps. The years that followed saw a flurry of activity, each providing further insights into the procedural complexities. Congressional hearings began to be held, with lawmakers questioning agency officials and corporate representatives about the slow pace of action. These hearings generated public records, transcripts that documented the institutional questions and frustrations. Simultaneously, individual states, often frustrated by the federal government's cautious approach, began to develop their own regulatory standards for PFAS in drinking water, groundwater, and even air emissions. This fragmented the regulatory landscape, creating a patchwork of different standards across the country, further complicating the public's understanding of what constituted safe levels and who was responsible for cleanup. In the early 2020s, the institutional gears began to turn more definitively towards enforceable federal action. In March 2023, the EPA proposed the first-ever national primary drinking water regulations for 6 PFAS compounds. This was a monumental procedural step, a proposed rule for legally enforceable maximum contaminant levels, MCLS, for PFOA and PFOS, and a group MCL for 4 other PFAS. This proposal, published in the Federal Register, opened a public comment period, a crucial stage in federal rulemaking where stakeholders, scientists, and the public can submit formal feedback. For many, this was seen as the strongest move yet towards comprehensive federal regulation. The public now saw not just an advisory, but a specific, proposed enforceable limit. However, a proposed rule is not a final rule. The regulatory process, by design, is methodical and multi-phased. After the public comment period closes, the EPA must review all submitted comments, conduct further scientific and economic analyses, and potentially revise the proposed rule before issuing a final rule. This entire sequence can take years, involving intricate administrative procedures, legal reviews, and often, subsequent legal challenges once the final rule is published. Even after a final rule is issued, water systems typically have several years to implement the necessary monitoring and treatment technologies. Each stage provides another layer of public documentation, thousands of comments, detailed agency responses, economic impact assessments. Yet each step, while bringing us closer to a final decision, also reveals the sheer inertia and careful deliberation built into the system, delaying the ultimate resolution. Concurrently, the EPA also advanced plans to designate PFOA and PFOS as hazardous substances under the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, more commonly known as Superfund. This designation, once finalized, would provide the EPA with more tools to require cleanup of contaminated sites and hold polluters accountable. Again, a proposed action undergoing a similar public comment and review process. It represents a significant procedural expansion of federal authority, moving beyond just drinking water to address broader environmental contamination. But the precise mechanisms of implementation, the prioritization of thousands of potential sites, and the legal challenges that will inevitably follow such a sweeping designation, all remain part of a vast, unfolding procedural narrative. So here we are, decades after the quiet scientific insights and years after the initial public outcry. We have a cascade of official documents, advisory levels, voluntary phase-out programs, congressional records, proposed regulations for drinking water, proposed hazardous substance designations. Each one is a product of intense institutional effort, often supported by extensive scientific review and public discourse. Each filing, each statement, each proposed rule marks a step forward, clarifying some aspect of the institutional response. Yet the story remains fragmented. The public has seen the problem acknowledged, steps proposed, and regulations drafted. But the full, enforceable, and comprehensive resolution continues to navigate the labyrinthine pathways of governmental and legal systems. Perhaps that's the nature of truly complex issues in a modern democracy. The process itself becomes the story, a testament to the slow, careful, often agonizingly incremental way institutions respond to emergent challenges, always with new information, new legal considerations, and new public expectations shaping each subsequent tentative step. Maybe that's what makes these stories worth returning to. We'll continue exploring them together. I'll see you in the next video.